Well, good morning and welcome. This is Breakfast Extra, but we're going to start on a very somber note today. Now, the past 1 week saw us wincing at a certain viral video. It was very hard to watch, but it needed to be seen. It was a young man. He was weak, he was injured, and he was surrounded by men who tortured him. His voice was trembling as he spoke to the camera. He was begging for help from whoever was watching at that time, and at the same time, he was also begging for help from his captors, or rather begging for mercy from his captors. Now, he was a core member of the National Youth Service Corps, a young Nigerian graduate answering the call to serve his country. But somewhere along the road between where he studied and where he was meant to serve, the country failed him. Now, to understand the weight of that failure, you have to understand what the NYSC was meant to be. And I'll tell you. The program was created in 1973 by the government of Yakubu Gowon, just 3 years after the Nigerian Civil War. Nigeria was bruised, distrust ran deep, and the idea was simple and it was hopeful as well. Send young Nigerians across the country, making neighbors out of strangers. The thinking at the time was that if young Nigerians lived together, worked together, and maybe even ate together, they might begin to understand each other. And slowly, maybe then, a nation would knit itself back together after the war. It was a beautiful idea, where at the end of which a certificate that said you had given something back to the country that raised you was awarded to you. And for decades, it became a rite of passage for Nigerian graduates. But every nation eventually has to answer one uncomfortable question. Is that system still working? Because the country of 1973 is not the country of today. In 1973, the fear was tribal division. Today, the fear is whether you will even arrive at your posting alive. Banditry, kidnapping, armed groups controlling highways, regions where even security agencies themselves tread carefully. Yet, the machinery of the NYSC continues to operate like as if it was still 1973. Young graduates are still sent across the long distances to their posting areas, still to navigate not just ordinary roads, but now dangerous highways, find their way to unfamiliar places with little more than just a call-up letter and optimism. And when things go wrong, the response often feels painfully familiar from the Nigerian authorities. Families negotiating with kidnappers, communities raising ransoms, a nation watching helplessly on social media. Which brings us back to that video. Because once the kidnapping became public on social media, Nigerians expected something. It was very simple. It ought to have happened. They needed evidence that the system designed to protect corps members had switched on. The first expectation was attention, immediate, visible attention. A young man in national service was captured. The video, while it was circulating across the country, something ought to have been done. In situations like this, institutions usually step forward quickly to signal that matters are being handled at the highest level. That urgency last week was difficult to see. In fact, it was absolutely missing. The second expectation was coordination. The NYSC does not run security operations, this we know, but it sits at the center of a network that should activate when a corps member is in danger. The police, the Department of State Service, the military in regions where banditry is active ought to have stepped in, but nothing happened. What people hoped to see was a rescue process, intelligence gathering, negotiation, if any, handled by professionals, a system moving deliberately to recover one of its own. Instead, the burden appeared to fall largely on the family, of which 10 million naira was eventually raised and reportedly paid to the bandits, and still no rescue, no action by the NYSC. At this point, the uneasy question and a loud one is, where is the effort by the NYSC? Because when the state calls a young graduates to national service, the relationship is not symbolic, it's actually contractual. It's one of trust. The corps member agrees to serve the country for a year, and in return, the country accepts responsibility for the young person's welfare. That responsibility is supposed to mean several things: safe posting, clear security assessment before deployment, guidance on dangerous routes, especially in this case, rapid response when something goes wrong, and visible institutional backing so families are not left alone in moments of crisis. In this case, those protections were totally absent. Nigeria simply just watched. Which leads us back to that large question Nigerians have been whispering for many years. Is the program still serving the purpose it was created for? The idea behind the NYSC was national unity, but unity would assume a country that can at least guarantee the safety of the young people it sends across the lengths and breadths of the country. Today, insecurity has rewritten the Nigerian map, and there are roads even people themselves who live there would avoid at sunset, regions where travel requires a calculation, and communities where kidnapping has become an industry. Yet, the system that sends graduates across the country still operates with the logic of a safer Nigeria of 1973. And that tension is growing harder to ignore now. Why? Well, it's simple. Because when a nation cannot guarantee the safety of those it calls to serve, the question is no longer administrative. The question now becomes philosophical. What exactly are we asking these young Nigerians to sacrifice? And for what kind of a country? On that somber note, once again, I say good morning and welcome to Breakfast Extra. We've got a host of very interesting conversations to have this morning, only if you stay with us. Once again, good morning and welcome.
Good morning again and welcome to Breakfast Extra. Today we begin with the road to the 2027 general elections. Now, the Electoral Commission says no official timetable has been released yet, but conversations about readiness, legal reforms, and political positioning have already begun. What must happen now to ensure credible polls is the biggest question. Next, from there, we'll examine the global ripple effects of rising tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran, and what a prolonged crisis in the Middle East means for African economies, including Nigeria. From there, we will look at the renewed debate around state police and discussions resume on whether decentralized policing could help address Nigeria's growing security challenges. Later, we move to Wellness Extra, where we focus on STI awareness, preventions, and the importance of testing. And in Breakfast or Extra Special today, we discuss fibroids and women's health, a condition affecting millions but still widely misunderstood. This is our lineup for this morning. Welcome again to Breakfast Extra. We continue after this break with the dailies. Stay with us.
Well, good morning and welcome. It is Breakfast Extra. You've met Inam. Of course, you have. Inam, hi. We're doing the papers already. I thought we'd have some time to actually chatter a bit.
We'll talk about it.
We will, won't we?
We'll definitely talk about it.
All right. How's your morning?
It was all right. Oh, it was a stressful morning. Don't bash me on. It was a very stressful morning. I think what's happening in Lekki right now and the traffic and the gridlocks is really, really bad. I stay around Ikate towards the Nikkei Art Gallery. So in order for me to meet my Uber this morning, because of the fact that from Freedom where you can't cross over, I had to walk all the way to Lekki Phase 1 to meet the Uber
At least
driver.
you put in some exercise.
Oh, Mazino.
There's always a good way to look at it.
I mean, I'm fit already.
You are, actually. I can't deny that.
Thank you.
Let's do the papers before it becomes car crash television. Let's start with the Sunday Punch this morning. Let's have that up on your screen. Front and center for the Sunday Punch, US-Iran war seems to be making all the rounds this week. Nigerians lose millions in dashed Umrah dreams. Intending pilgrims lament financial losses to cancelled trips. I paid 13 million. Everything now messed up. It's painful. I can assure you messed up was not the actual word he must have used. Says a popular butcher. I have to change my job. I think we're in the wrong job, you and I, Inam.
Wrong line over.
13 million, a butcher. Okay. At the top for the Saturday Punch 2027, 4 ministers to quit Tinubu's cabinet, and ADC kicks as president posts 65 ambassadors. We still on that. Daily rise of fraudulent surgery hospitals. That's one story you might want to read there. Sliced for profit. Is that what it says? Sliced for profit. Yes. And how Edo man sponsored me for Marjorie School to university. Nice human angle story there. And this one. Atiku Obi condemned Borno massacre, terrorists vow to attack Abuja. This is really becoming scary. And I don't know if it's just me, but does it seem like there's more and rampant coverage? Is it just coverage or is it happening? Do we have more of these instances of banditry and kidnappings and the rest? Or is it just that we're reporting it more now since the invasion?
That's really crazy.
Since the relationship with America.
I think it's really, really crazy. I want us to get to the conversation with Boala yesterday. We're going to get into that. But when you looked at the statistics, billions were made in banditry, kidnapping, and terrorism. That's a different ballgame altogether. And I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult for it to be curbed now is because these truths are actually coming out. It's a billion, I don't want to say naira or dollar, but it's a billion in currency industry. How and when would you want to stop that? So it's a painful one. Mazino, let's move to the Weekend Trust.
All right, Weekend Trust then.
Weekend Trust. So I'll start with the picture right in front because it goes back to the conversation that we're going to have later, Mazino. Tinubu's men, rise of the loyalists, right? And then at the top there on the left, it says, Dambazu gets China, or mockery Mexico as Tinubu posts ambassadors. All right, that's the ambassadorial appointments. Wife of alleged coup plotter protects 160-day detention, or she protests, I beg your pardon, 160-day detention. And then court grants Malami's son and wife bail, including Malami as well. And then, of course, it says there how Ramadan, apologies, Mazino, just help me, how Ramadan did what?
How Ramadan feeds needy
and small businesses, right? And then the bottom there, and that's a very painful, sad picture. Harrowing world of Plateau, Benue, children of war. I mean, it goes back to what we just said now about the banditries and the reality of what is happening in a war that we haven't yet declared a war, I presume.
It's very sad, especially from the videos from last week, like I talked about the instance of the National Youth Service Corps member who was kidnapped. I expected that something was going to be done, but absolutely nothing. It didn't seem like a finger was even lifted by the NYSC authorities. Granted, it's not within their, what do you call it now? Jurisdiction for the NYSC to, but you do serve, you are a system for the country and you are in relations with other security forces or agencies.
But the thing is, even if they tried to do something, Mazino, unfortunately, what would they have done that was actually going to be listened to from the top? And I think these are the realities now.
The NYSC is the top at the end of the day, whether you like it or not. They might not be that security agency, but they are next to these security agencies. And at least something ought to have been done. There was no statement. There was no attention whatsoever given to it. There might have been, but in situations like this, especially when you still have other corps members serving, what do you expect them to think? What level of patriotism do you expect them to put into a system that doesn't seem to care for them? So more than the actual fact that you need to rescue, they needed to have rescued this individual. They needed to wonder about the thousands more who are still inside of the corps. And watching and what
message they're communicating to them with their actions.
Exactly. It's very poor. It's a terrible situation currently. It is. But let's move to the Saturday Times now, shall we? Tinubu approves posting of 65 ambassadors. We've seen that in other papers. A mockery to Mexico, Fani Kayode to Germany, Dambazo to China, Senator Jimoh Ibrahim, Nigeria's permanent representative to the UN, and posting another blunder by Tinubu, says the ADC. At the top, World Cup 2026, Nigeria still awaiting FIFA's verdict, says Diko. And how Ashake chose Olamide's YBNL over Chocolate City, maybe it was a good idea. That's it for the Saturday Times front page.
All right, Mazino, let's move from there to the Saturday Tribune. The Saturday Tribune up at the top there says, Tinubu inaugurates a committee on the GAMCO to unlock started power or stranded power. Sorry, my English today.
It's not your English, it's
I
your
left
eyes.
it in Lekki.
It's your or maybe that.
And then page 4 says, where is the signed Electoral Act 2026? Governor Makinde asks the FG. Right in the bottom there, which is your headline for today, at Awolowolo Memorial Lecture. Help me with the surname, Mazino.
Sorry, I wasn't with you on that one. My apologies. Just skip it. They won't
Anyauku Anyanku tells FG, INEC, the world is watching you over the 2027 polls. The world has been watching for a while now. Vote buying culture can't produce good leadership, Professor Adebauni says. And then, of course, Awe's legacies remain benchmarks for good governance. This is Tinubu quoting. There's a pretty picture there. Right underneath there again, Awolowolo Dosun announces Awo Foundation Future Leaders Fellowship. And then petrol sells above 1,020 naira per litre in Ibadan and resurface.
It's happening already.
It's happening again.
I said this last week, if you remember, during the month.
But Boala said they gave us the alerts.
Oh, you saw
that it was going to be bullish for a while.
It was to be expected, and we have that inside of our conversation today. We're going to be talking about the effects of the Iranian war on Nigeria and our fuel, petrol, energies generally. But the funny thing about this situation is this: it's not just oil that's being affected; it's everything else, from food to pharmaceuticals to daily necessities for life. So you want to imagine what these countries in the region are going through. If you think that it's just your fuel that's just been affected here, they don't have any food.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
All right. What do we have next? Do I move on to the nation?
Yeah, let's move on.
Grand. Borno abductions. Don't succumb to fear, Tinubu tells Nigerians. Orders rescue of abductees, commends troops. Zulum visits victims, pledges rescue of abductees. Troops repel coordinated attacks on military locations. This is over 200 victims this time, and the numbers seem to be, well, they stay about the same, but it's just the frequency of these occurrences that really begins to worry you. Jimo Ibrahim is Nigeria's UN permanent rep. Fani Kayode, once again, a reiteration of the ambassadors, the 65 that was posted by Tinubu. And President inaugurates Grid Asset Management Company Committee. There's so many headlines on The Nation this morning. How Tinubu saved me from impeachments by Ayedatiwa says all 26 state lawmakers signed notice to remove him. Claims late Akeredolu anointed him as successor. Yay. OPL 245, Adoke hails president's demands apology from federal government. And wife battery against allegations against member Rocks Cross River Assembly. I saw that video. Ooh, it wasn't a pretty one. Finally, for The Nation, why would impeach Kano Deputy Governor Gwazo by lawmaker? Cite alleged cross misconducts related to his dual role as LG Commissioner. Dual role as LG Commissioner. Interesting. What a way.
Mazina, before we jump on that, I want us to move quickly to the Vanguard.
All right.
And then we'll mash this up and have a bit of a conversation about it. So at the top there, Rivers. Amaichi's house attacked, ADC's office set ablaze. Okay. Again, these political wars are becoming a bit of a interesting, having a bit of an interesting twist. But then right next to it, it says the NDDC has transitioned from a transaction to transformation. This is Ogbuku. Tinubu inaugurates committee on a grid asset management COI. Right there in yellow, I liked this. Iran behind terrorism in Nigeria, the Israeli ambassador says. Now, this is an interesting one, and I say I like it because actually I'll give a shout out to Rufai, who obliterated the ambassador for making statements like this. There's a bit of a tit and tat that's going on where it's like we're very intentional about making the others look bad. So if you are having a conversation in Nigeria concerning Israel is always going to look for something that says, well, Iran is doing this to you guys, and it's a bit of a tit for tat.
It's taking away the attention from the real issue.
Exactly. So you should come to our side because this is what they're doing to your nation.
Yeah, it's like saying, wow, your glasses are horrible, and you're like, well, your stomach is protruding.
Right? So
it's very childish.
Yeah.
It makes you imagine the state of lack of diplomacy that we have in the world now, brought on by one man.
Deteriorating tremendously.
And it's spreading. It's contagious because everybody's like, if he can do it, I can do it.
Exactly.
If he can say it as blatantly as so, why can't I just eject all diplomacy and say it like I want to?
But yeah, so the Israeli ambassador defended himself by saying, it is well documented that the Islamic movement of Nigeria is backed by the Iranian regime. They sponsor Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups. It is propaganda. Of course, Iran responded and fired back. Right underneath there, Utomi said, why Nigeria is in a mess. Good one. Our judiciary dead and buried says we're better off without 2027 polls if ... No matter how long, INEC officials will go to jail over 2023 polls. Tinubu once said, "Don't vote for me if I don't fix the power in my first term." That one has been lingering forever. And then the FG panel confirms ex-minister forged UNN certificate. First Lady on President Tinubu, "In 40 years of our marriage, we've never raised a voice at each other."
Interesting.
Very. Says, "If you don't fear God, my relationship with you won't last." I like that. And then terrorists killed 20 in Benue, kidnapped 10 in Kwara, hours after Borno bloodbath. Yeah.
Is that all?
Yes, that's all.
Oh, you skipped one, Sisi. But let's move on now to the Saturday Nation. Inconsequential. Moment of truth for Ruto, Raila Odinga deal, rather. And, of course, this is Kenyan. Plan for regulator to check rogue pastors. Not going to do much on this because... And promise galore in final farewell for Flari MP Joanna Ngeno. And that's for the Kenyan Saturday Nation here. I think that might be... Do we have any others that we might be taking? Let's see now. Yeah, the Saturday Sun. So I'm just going to jump on the Saturday Sun. Middle East crisis. More trouble for Nigerians. Prices of PMS, diesel, cooking gas, others go up. Experts say inflation may rise. FT set to evacuate 1,000 Nigerians stranded in Iran, Gulf Arab states. Despite U.S. airstrikes, terror attacks escalate. Over 500 Nigerians killed in 2 months, cause kidnap tensions as horror spreads to southwest. Suspected killers, herders kill 16 in renewed Benue attacks. At the top of the Saturday Sun, Tinubu sends ambassadors to UN, 64 countries. And Malami, wife's son, gets 600 million naira bail. And Peter Obi, I'll contest 2027 presidency despite intimidation. Always a very resilient man, so we'll be expecting to see what 2027 would be, even with the internal wranglings of the separate parties. I think we're having that conversation, if I'm not mistaken. Might be our very first one as we see how parties are preparing for 2027 with the timetable not yet out, even past 365 days until the elections, which should be, but plenty to talk about there when we get into that conversation. So those are the dailies for this morning. Do hang with us because we've got the conversations are coming. We'll be right back. Once again, this is Breakfast Extra. Good morning once again and welcome. Let's have our first big story for today inside of Breakfast Extra. Now, Nigeria's next general elections may still be months away, but the political clock is already ticking. The debate around 2027 elections timetable has become a national conversation, especially after false schedules began circulating online during the week. And the Electoral Commission has stepped in. It clarified the situation. The Independent National Electoral Commission insists that it has not officially released the timetable for 2027 elections, stressing that the law requires the notice of elections to be issued not later than 360 days before the polls. At the same time, the Commission says preparations are underway by the final release, but the final release is tied to ongoing amendments to the Electoral Act by the National Assembly.
Now, to help us unpack the political readiness, the legal framework, as well as what Nigerians should expect as the road leads to the 2027 elections, we are joined by Kennedy Ahanotu, a national youth leader of the Labour Party, as well as Barrister Gozie Nwachukwu, organizing secretary of the PDP in Imo State. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Kennedy, let's begin with you. Now, with less than 2 years of the elections, do you believe opposition parties are truly prepared to challenge the ruling establishment in 2027? Kennedy, that's for you.
Pardon? Can you take the question, please?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. My question was, now with less than 2 years to the elections, do you believe that opposition parties are truly prepared to challenge the ruling establishment by 2027?
That question is so simple but difficult to answer, given the realities on ground. Political parties and oppositions in Nigeria are currently under life support given the fact that for the first time in Nigeria, the main opposition political parties have been infiltrated by all manner of crises. And sometimes I think these are natural, but sometimes I think it's engineered, it's being manipulated by the political gladiators, the current political crop of politicians that we have, who doesn't believe in opposition. Because for me, it's clear that certain politicians in Nigeria don't believe in opposition. And looking at the recent passage of the Electoral Act, some of the political leaders in opposition, instead of taking time to do a research, to do a proper follow-up on the Electoral Act that is being promoted by the National Assembly, all their attention and interest were only on electronic transmission. Given the electronic transmission, if there is no primary by political parties, if there is no existence of political parties, how will the electronic transmission happen? Because for you to participate, you must be nominated by a political party. For you to participate and the result to be transmitted, a political party has to be on the ballot. But in a situation where a political party is not on the ballot, what else shall you do? Nothing. If you look at that Electoral Act, they were lazy, those political gladiators, to understand that there's an importation of membership register, which you must submit to INEC, that is bearing name, bearing pictures, bearing all manner of informations that will make up the membership registration. And this is just within the window of 1 month to do that, because the primary election is expected to start on 23rd of next month and end on 30th of May. So how many political parties that are in opposition, underfunded, not funded, that will have the capacity to start up this membership registration and meet up with the demands of INEC? Now, a political party is like a non-governmental organization. Only their membership dues of possibly 100 naira or 200. Now look at the penalties that are being positioned for political parties to pay if they default in any of these things that have been written in the new Electoral Act. You see that this is an agenda to bring Nigeria to one-party system. But I will not conclude yet. Let's continue to monitor things as it goes. Recently, IPAC, Inter-Party Advisory Committee, have rejected the position of that Electoral Act and have rejected the position of INEC and have asked that that Electoral Act be reviewed. So, given certain foundations that I've made, I don't think opposition is truly ready, especially for this 2027 election. Truth be told, given the realities in the recently passed Electoral Act.
All right, so Mr. Hanatu, what you're saying is that the reform and INEC itself is positioned in a way that does not help the opposition, because it's kind of like weeding out especially those modest parties that can't afford all of these penalties that it's putting forward with all the reforms that it's making. Now, I get that, and that's position, that's pointing at the INEC, whether they're doing their jobs right or not. But what about the individual parties themselves, like the LP, which you serve, or the PDP for Mr. Nwachukwu here? So, Mr. Nwachukwu, let me ask you about this. If INEC, and if we say INEC is ready, we'll come back to asking that question. Are the parties themselves ready with all the internal wranglings that's going on? It doesn't give the voter confidence that this party is ready for 2027, especially for the PDP. What's your take on this?
Well, I would like to point out that I was organizing secretary of the party in 2024. I'm no longer an organizing secretary at the moment.
Okay.
Then, secondly, the truth of the matter is that most of the political parties, just like the youth leader talked about, they have been most of the parties in opposition, the key ones, like those that participated and had strong showings in the last election in 2023, like the PDP and the Labour Party, have been engulfed by internal wranglings, that has led to court cases and all that. Most of these things were self-inflicted. They were self-inflicted, you know, because those who are doing these battles in court were all together in that party. Nobody who went to court in any of these parties. Most of the people who went to court have been in these parties all the while. And most of the mistakes and the errors that have occurred were self-inflicted. And it's just like the PDP. The PDP now is a shadow of itself. The PDP cannot say that they are ready for any election, because the truth of the matter is that what exists now, what the Federal High Court in Ibadan has recognized, so to say. First of all, we even have two judgments, one from an Oyo High Court, one from an Oyo Federal High Court. The one in the Oyo High Court says the Samilu Turaki ESCO that were elected at Ibadan are the rightful executives to run the affairs of the party at the national level. The Federal High Court, I hear, recognizes the other faction of some guy like that who was the zonal chairman from the North Central Zone as the ESCO that should run the party, and that one is a caretaker committee. This caretaker committee, nobody in that party up to date knows who formed it or how it was formed, but a court has recognized it. The other courts also in Abuja, Federal High Courts in Abuja, have also voided that particular national convention that took place in Ibadan. So the truth of the matter is that the PDP is in a state of comatose. So the PDP is not ready for any election. They can't do any proper election now. The Labour Party also has those kind of issues. They are still in court. The truth of the matter is that the major opposition parties in Nigeria cannot at the moment challenge the ruling party in any electoral process, because the election is the the things I hold to talked about.
Barrister Machuku, my apologies for butting in, but we have very little time here, so I have to get you to get to the answers real quick. But let me ask you this question now: with the 360 days that's required for notice by INEC for elections, we've passed 360. And that's what the amendments, or one of the factors the amendment is trying to also consider as well, to make it 300 days. That shortens the notice period. Now, if you paint a grim picture that the PDP is in a state of comatose, what implications further are there for all the political parties where this date, this period, 300 days, has been shortened to 300 days? Are there any implications for the parties when it comes to preparation or INEC itself? Barrister Machuku, that's for you.
Yes, there are implications because these things are legal time. Yeah, there are implications because these are legal timelines. If a situation occurs, because I was surprised when INEC came out to say that they have not officially released the date, so that further, puts the whole some form of uncertainty in the whole process. And when there's uncertainty, people can't prepare because people need these timelines to be able to prepare properly. That's one. So those things are legal time, and when you fail them, those things can also lead to litigations. So I think that, I don't know what INEC is thinking with now, with those dates and times, because where it is now, INEC may need to go back to the National Assembly for some form of amendment, for them to come within the confines of that timeline. And when will that amendment come? How is it? What processes is it going to take again? So the truth of the matter is that INEC, in their approach to this election, have been very, very lackluster. Very lackluster. They've not been proactive. They are behaving as if elections started with Amupitan, that elections have not been held all these years. So INEC is making it difficult for political parties to even plan for this election. With all this, they are flip-flopping in terms of the release of the timetable.
All right.
Kennedy, I'll come to you. There have been legal battles over who legitimately leads the party. How does this uncertainty impact party structure and confidence among the members?
This is referring to the LP now.
Like I said, it's quite unfortunate what is happening in Labour Party. And I will also point my fingers at INEC. Now, look at the beautiful Electoral Act that is being passed by the National Assembly. They have carried all the power of even political parties that made political parties' decisions supreme. They have carried all the power and given to INEC. That means that you can elect a governor today and he will write a direct letter to INEC and decide who will be the chairman or the leader of the party. Before now, it is not so. Political parties are supreme, and whatever decision they make is binding for them. For the case of Labour Party, few persons from the National Assembly during the time of the former INEC chairman, through the legislative oversight of the National Assembly chairman on electoral matters, went to meet Mahmoud and told Mahmoud this is the leader of the party. This is who they want to become the chairman of the party. And Mahmoud started listening to them. INEC is not supposed to be listening to individuals. INEC is supposed to be listening to political parties. INEC is supposed to communicate with political parties. And when a political party does something that is not in compliance with their regulations and guidelines, INEC is supposed to write officially to that political party to ask them to either redo it or to cancel it or possibly find a way to reconcile. But what we have in Nigeria today is that an individual elected by a political party can just walk to INEC and now begin to parley with INEC, lobby INEC, and begin to do this with INEC. For example, in the Labour Party constitution, there is nothing like caretaker committee. And in the Labour Party constitution, you cannot have a substantive NEC meeting without the 36 state chairmen and secretaries of the party. So I don't know how Nenadi came about. A governor called a town hall meeting in Umuahia and said that he is dissolving the national NWC, dissolving NEC, dissolving the state executive, dissolving the local government executive, dissolving the ward executive via an administrative fiat. Where on earth has that ever happened? And recently, a court, which Supreme Court have given authorities, plenary of authority, that a court does not have jurisdiction to judge, to invade, or to decide on the leadership of any political party. A high court, a lower court in Nigeria, 21 day of January, declared somebody a leader of the party. That is where the Labour Party is. And I'm telling them that if any political contestant ventures do primary with that declaration, they will fail. So you see, there is a calculated agenda to make sure that oppositions does not produce candidates, eligible candidates for the 2027 election. And it's unfortunate that political parties in Nigeria will produce members that will not be loyal to the party, that will not obey the party constitution. That is where our democracy is today. So it's unfortunate.
Well, Mr. Hanato, it's one thing to say that INEC is the reason why these parties find themselves in these situations, but internally, when you look at it, there are legal constitutions that are breached by the parties or individuals inside of the parties themselves, like in the Labour Party instance. But let's leave the Labour Party and parties themselves and their preparedness, but let's talk about INEC now specifically as we look at 2027 coming, as we've crossed that 360 days already. What people should expect from INEC is final passage of the Electoral Amendment Bill, release of the official INEC timetable, voters registration or revalidation exercise, party primaries. There's a lot more. Election security planning. I'm wondering whether we are seeing all of this. So the question now is, what should the people be looking at INEC, or rather, what should the people be looking to see from INEC as we approach the election days to justify that they are actually in preparation?
For me, we are not expecting much from INEC, given their record and given their antecedents. What are we expecting from an electoral umpire that instead of dealing with political parties, they are dealing with individuals? So, and what they are working on is their guideline, not Electoral Act. Electoral Act have been passed. They are working on their guideline to now align with the recently passed Electoral Act. And I can assure you that when this guideline comes out, there will be further provisions that will demystify or make it difficult for opposition to participate. Watch out in coming days, the regulations will be out, and you will see provisions that will further make it difficult for opposition political parties to be involved in the 2027 election.
Okay,
so
then.
Nigerians do not trust INEC. That is the fact. Given that each year there is reduction in electoral participation.
Okay.
Voters turnout are continuously coming down because they will come out to vote and their vote seems not to count. INEC will change the goalposts. This guideline they are trying to review was reviewed in 2022 after the passage of the 2022 Electoral Act. And after that review, they made it clear that they are going to transmit election results. But eventually, even at Chatham House, the then INEC chairman, Mahmood, said it clearly that the election will be transmitted electronically and real time. But can you believe that at the middle of the game, the same INEC that is supposed to be unbiased, that is supposed to be electoral umpire, now started changing the goalposts. And eventually, they ended up saying that there is a glitch, a language that have not been able to find out the meaning relating to elections in Nigeria till date.
All right,
Glitch.
Mr. Hanatu.
What is a glitch? So we don't expect much from INEC.
All right.
I think they have endorsed the opposition. Maybe all of us should endorse the opposition for 2027 election.
That would not be democracy
Maybe
at the
all
end
of
of
us
the
should
day.
endorse the ruling party for 2027 election.
It seems to be what's happening, but that does not signify democracy. Mr. Hanatu, tell you what we're going to do. Let's go on a break. Mr. Nwachukwu or Barrister Nwachukwu, when we get back, I want that same response from you, or rather answer to the question that I just asked Mr. Hanatu. When we get back from this break, just stay with us. Welcome back. We still have our guests here as we talk about preparedness for 2027 when it comes to INEC and the political parties, what hurdles they have to pass, and what legal implications might be as we look forward to the release of the timetable for 2027 presidential elections. We still have with us Mr. Hanatu and Barrister Nwachukwu, Kosi Nwachukwu, and Mr. Kennedy Nwachukwu, and Hanatu, who have been speaking with us since the start of the hour. Barrister Nwachukwu, I asked Mr. Hanatu earlier regarding the preparedness of INEC for the 2027 elections. I want to ask you the same question, but let's take a look at the road ahead. What are the citizens, or what are Nigerians supposed to be looking for? What signs are they supposed to be looking for regarding preparedness of INEC when it comes to security and especially logistics?
Yeah, thank you. The truth of the matter is that the most important expectation of Nigerians from INEC is an official release of the timetable for this election. Without a timetable that will enable citizens know what is expected of INEC and what are the timelines, what are the times when things should happen, like the continued voter registration and all that. Without that timetable, the electoral process is filled with an air of uncertainty. Until that happens, it is going to affect the confidence and the participation enthusiasm of citizens. So INEC should please release this timetable officially, deal with that matter first. The citizens expect that by now, things like the continued voter registration should have kicked off, and then that, some of these things, you see, because one of the things that has happened is that the time for the release of funds to INEC for election in the 2022 Act was 1 year to election. Now it has been shortened to 6 months to election. This is an area that people need to take notes. when it was 1 year to election that INEC should get funds, there were still logistical challenges close to the election in terms of distribution of materials. Procurement and distribution of materials have always been challenging because some of these materials have to be produced, have to be printed. Some even have to be sourced from outside our shores. Now that the timetable is not even out, the new Electoral Act has further compressed the time within which funds must be released to INEC. This is a very dangerous signal. That reduction of the timeline when money should get to INEC shouldn't have been tampered with at all. Because without funding, logistics is going to be very challenging. I am afraid that the crafters of this new Electoral Act, I don't know whether they took into consideration the past elections and the challenges that have happened with distribution of materials and logistics and procurement before they arrived at these 6 months. That will be very challenging. So Nigerians would want to see the timetable out. They will also want to see INEC taking steps to make sure that the elections are devoid of hitches in terms of the registration. But one thing that is good now, which this new act has, is that citizens can now print their voter details online from the INEC website. So you don't need to wait for the plastic cards. That's very good. That also helps to lessen the cumbersome process of printing and collection of those cards. Most people go to those centers, they see their names online, but they can't even find those cards at the centers where they should collect them. So now that provision, if it will be seamless like it is supposed to be, just go online, see your details, you print it out. That one is also a very good innovation. But until that timetable is released, and a lot is still ominous. Nobody knows what INEC has in mind, because we don't even know, because the date of the election now affects other dates, because you keep seeing the provisions is 120 days to an election, 21 days to an election, submission of register to primaries, because the date of primaries are also supposed to be included. They're supposed to be contained in this timetable. So all those days that have to do with submission of electronic registers, publication of candidates of party, and all that, those things are condition precedent on the timetable being released. So without the release of that timetable, the electoral process is in jeopardy.
You could hear us in the midst of you trying to answer that question. I was trying to get your attention because you said something very important. And it was the point of the question I asked from before regarding distribution and logistics. I wanted to know what exactly INEC should do when it comes to distribution. Because in the past, it's always been a relationship between INEC and the NURT. Is this a sustainable mode of distribution or logistics when it comes to elections? And should anything happen in the next 300 days before the presidential elections for 2027? If you can make that response really short, please.
Yes, logistics movement of this distribution of these materials has always been a challenge. I think that, yes, having arrangements with the umbrella body of the vehicle, the bus owners association, and then those who ply the roads, that's okay, NUTLW. But the point is that I thought that INEC should have gone beyond that now. Mm-hmm. I thought INEC should have gone beyond that. I thought INEC should have gone to the point where they should have, for the purposes of security of these sensitive materials, I thought INEC should have gone to the extent of having procured, doesn't take much, their own distribution.
Independent logistic
like
apparatus.
Vehicles. What is this distribution?
All right, Barrister, thank you so much. Sorry to just...
If if it's ferried from the headquarters to the states.
All right, thank you. Kennedy, I'd like to come to you now, especially because you are more on the youth side of things. Let's look at the misinformation. Can you give us a bit of a background as to how misinformation about election timetables threaten public trust in the electoral process?
Yeah, just like he said, if we don't know the guideline, if we've not seen the guideline and we don't know exact date that the submission of candidates to INEC and all those stuffs are happening, it will be difficult for the younger generation to even know what to do as regard to 2027 general election. So I think this electoral guideline that INEC is yet to produce and give to the public is really holding a lot of things to a standstill. I pray that they quickly do that within the next week so that people will know, in practical terms, in realistic terms, what they should expect and what they should do in preparation to the 2027 general election.
Right.
The younger generation will not give up. They will continue to, participate because the enthusiasm is there. They are interested in making sure that they are involved in a process that will bring a leader that will make them become inclusive in governance.
Right.
So we are interested in participating, but we have to understand where the goalposts are and understand the guidelines and the things expected for the election.
I like that, understanding where the goalposts are. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Now, it's quite clear that as the countdown to the 2027 elections begins, the real questions may not simply be when a timetable is released. The deeper questions is whether Nigerian or Nigeria's institutions, political parties, and voters themselves are ready to take on the responsibility that comes with this. We go on a quick break now, but when we return, we bring you much more right here on Breakfast Extra. Stay with us.
Top of the hour, it's time for the headlines. My name is Mazino Appeal. Now we begin by telling you that Frank Mba, alongside 7 other Deputy Inspectors General of Police, have retired from the police force following changes in the leadership structure of the force. The development comes after Bola Tinubu appointed Tunji Disu as the new Inspector General of Police, replacing Kayode Egbetokun. In response to the changes, the Police Service Commission has announced the promotion of 7 other Assistant Inspector Generals to the rank of DIG after a selection process. The newly promoted officers include Zakaria Farah, Achiang, Zango Ibrahim Baba, Isiaka Mohammed, Margaret Agebe Ochala, Mohammed Abdul Sulaiman, Kenachuku Onwumeli, and Umar Shehu Nandada. Now, away from that, wives of officers who were arrested by the Nigerian military over allegations of plotting to overthrow the current administration have appealed to President Bola Tinubu to end alleged victimization and maltreatment of their husbands in custody. Some of them spoke to newsmen in Abuja, appealing to the president to treat their husbands as innocent victims until they are proven guilty. They alleged that since their arrest, they have been deprived of visitation by their families, a situation that has become worrisome.
We appeal to Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a father and a grandfather, to Her Excellency, the First Lady, Oluremi Tinubu, a mother, grandmother, and a revered pastor, as leaders of the nation at this moment in time, to please look upon our situation with compassion, wisdom, courage, and justice. We respectfully beseech to examine and be receptive to all the facts of this highly sensitive case with an open mind, please. We ask only for what the 1999 Constitution guarantee every Nigerian, that our husbands to be treated as innocent until proven guilty by a competent court of law. The allegation against them must not be used as tool or scapegoat. We want due process, nothing more and nothing less.
We shouldn't live in a country where anything under a democratic society is done in secrecy. even if it is true that these men committed these offenses, they have a right to be given an open, transparent, and fair trial in an open courtroom. You must therefore allow their families to visit with them and allow lawyers to prepare for their trial. That is how it is done all over the world.
The people who are in government now should be careful. They may leave government now and somebody will accuse them in the future that they are planning coup. So this is why we are saying that nobody is defending anybody. But we are saying that where there is no genuine evidence, if there is coup, present them before a court of law. Lead evidence. Evidence is like smoke. It cannot be hidden. Lead evidence against them. But if there is no evidence, leave these people alone. Release them. Let them go and face their lives.
A family of former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai have called for his immediate and unconditional release from the custody of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission. In a statement issued on Friday, the family argued that the former governor's continued detention has no legal basis. The statement was signed by Bello El-Rufai, a member of the House of Representatives of Nigeria representing Kaduna North Federal Constituency. According to the family, El-Rufai was first taken into custody on February 18th. The anti-corruption agency later obtained a remand order from the magistrate court the following day. Now, a bit of politics. The Independent National Electoral Commission has dismissed an information circulating online claiming that March 26 was fixed as the deadline for government officials seeking elective office to resign. In a statement on Friday, the Commission clarified that the information did not originate from the electoral body and described the graphic as false and misleading. INEC urged the public media organizations and political stakeholders to disregard the message, warning against the spread of unverified electoral information. Nigeria's national electricity grid generated more than 3,537 megawatts as at 6 p.m., supplied by 14 GenCos. That's according to the NIGGRID dashboard. To address the sector's challenges, President Bola Tinubu inaugurated an 11-member committee to oversee the creation of the Grid Asset Management Company Limited, which will improve grid management strength and also strengthen transmission, review laws, and tackle stranded power generation following Federal Executive Council approval.
We're here for the inauguration of the Grid Asset Management Company, otherwise known as GAMCO, which is basically to optimize and revolutionize the power generation and particularly the transmission sector. I have here terms of reference, but I will also note the terms of reference received from the Secretary to the Government is, I believe, broader than what Mr. President, the mandate that Mr. President had given. I think we should stick to the mandate, which is to look at the legal implications, if any, if there are overlaps, if there are things we need to correct in terms of establishing and setting this up. If there are legal hurdles which we need to cross, we need to do that. That was.
The of the committee is just, we know what the vision of Mr. President is. We know what he wants. Our own obligation or duty is to ensure that we achieve this without running foul of the law or disrupting existing arrangement in a manner that will negatively impact on our vision or mission in this regard.
In terms of reference, very well structured, and I align myself with the submission of Honorable Attorney General, and to admit that this is very innovative and must be supported.
Our civil society group has demanded clarity over inconsistencies observed in certificate of the National Youth Service Corps NYSC and the Nigerian law school belonging to the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Benjamin Kalu. The group mentioned that the NYSC Act requires a continuous one-year service, while Nigerian law school prohibits students from serving as corps members during study, raising concerns about the legality of participating in both programs simultaneously. They urged the Deputy Speaker to step aside pending clarification of the allegations, calling on the NYSC, the Nigeria Law School, and the Council of Legal Education to make public records the records of Kalu comprising his service here and academic participation to resolve current controversies.
Demand clarity as to the possibility of Right Honorable Kalu after swearing two oaths, one with the National Youth Service Corps and the other with the Nigerian Law School, that he will abide faithfully and wholly with the demands of the service year and the rigors of the law school, still carry out two functions which are mutually exclusive and not to be held for perjury and for violating the rules and regulations of the National Youth Service Corps and the Nigerian Law School. We are committed to following this to the latter and will occupy the National Assembly if after 72 hours the various authorities.
And that's all the news this top of the hour. It's still Breakfast Extra. We've got conversation coming. Do stay with us. We'll be back.
You're still with us on Breakfast Extra this Saturday morning. Now, conflict in the Middle East has rarely stayed within the borders of the region. When tensions rise there, the ripple effects are often left or felt across the global economy. And for Africa, those shocks can be particularly severe. Now, the growing confrontation involving the United States, Israel, and Iran have already raised concerns about global energy markets, shipping routes, and the international trade. Now, for many African economies that depend heavily on imported fuel and global supply chains, disruptions in the Middle East could quickly translate into higher prices, inflation, as well as economic uncertainty.
Nigeria is not immune to this. Despite being an oil producer, the country still relies heavily on imported refined products and is deeply connected to global trade routes that could be affected if tensions escalate any further. So to help us understand the legal and geopolitical dimensions of this unfolding crisis and what it could mean for Africa's economy stability, we are joined by Magonga, legal practitioner, and also Adeni Kunu, international public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, you are welcome. Thank you very much for joining us here. Magonga, it's the first time I'll be meeting you. Interesting name there. So nice you had to be named twice. But let's start with you this morning. From a geopolitical standpoint, how significant is the escalation between the U.S., Israel, and Iran for the rest of the world before we come to Africa?
That this escalation is a watershed moment, because it has unleashed a cascade of interconnected crises, economic, geopolitical, and strategic. They're impacting on everybody's daily life. You know, like, for example, with the closing up of the Strait of Hormuz, which actually traffics almost 20% of the freight, be it petroleum, fertilizer, I mean, generally food. The kind of situation that has been triggered by the closing of that strait has overspilling effect to the entire African continent, because which actually is supposed to be a very, very serious moment for us that shows that we need to start being self-reliant, because the repercussions that is going to have just by the strait itself is phenomenal, to say the least. And this conflict by its own nature is going to affect very many African countries. Because you see, for example, oil, we do not even dictate the prices of oil. That's why, when I see what Dangote was trying to do in Nigeria, I'm very, very proud. But if this thing was replicated holistically in Africa, we'd be placed very well. But right now, we don't dictate the prices of oil. Right now, because there's a war there, it's going to affect us big time. coupled by the issue of the millions of Africans that are working in the Middle East region. They can't even find their way back here. The money that is supposed to be repatriated back to Africa, to their families and everything, that is going to be a very, very big blot in our financial capability as individual homes. Okay. That's just a brief overview.
Oh my God, thank you very much. Mr. Kunu, let's come to you. Let's talk about the whole trade network and where Africa lies here. It's not just oil, like Magonga just noted. There's also food. There are things that we actually trade with these nations. But particularly Nigeria now, when it comes to oil, there's a certain belief. People thought that this would create an opportunity for Nigeria, but it doesn't seem to be doing so, because at the end of the day, we do import refined oil. How does this show the lack in our systems? What does this expose for Nigeria or Africa in general?
Well, I think that there's a lesson being learned from this global disruption in terms of how energy sources are sourced and distributed, as well as talking about other forms of commodities. And the lesson is that we have to ensure we evolve systems and strategies of being self-dependent as far as we are concerned. If we look at what has happened, expectedly, one would have thought that at the point of disruption, the country should pass home. But the people of this country, just about 48 hours ago, we've seen Dangote refineries and some other bodies complaining and having a brickbat over the fact that Dangote, although got the crude at certain amount of money, and that certain amount of money is what the crude is sold for right now, but that Dangote refinery has increased it. That in itself is a reflection of how poorly we're prepared for global disruptions to be able to leverage it. At this point, the problems we're having is not the same problem a country like Angola, a country like, I believe, Egypt, a country like Algeria seem to be having, because their systems are well structured to be able to leverage the problem of supply of crude along the respective areas that has been talked about. So the huge lesson that I believe we have learned from this, but it seems as if we have not actually learned that lesson. Because if we looked at when we had the Iraq War and many major wars within the past 25 years, Nigeria has not benefited in any way. I have to say that for the record, because if indeed we've been able to put things right in terms of refineries functioning, and we do not continue to have people siphon money in the name of turnaround maintenance of refineries and promise all of the emptiness when we're talking about modular refineries, this is the moment for Nigeria to make more money. In the absence of being able to rise above the shadows of the 4 refineries that actually came to us since the beginning of the nation called Nigeria, this would have been our time. Then at the same time, I'm wondering how it has become such a thing, because if we're talking about this problem of not taking advantage of the global disruption in the supply of energy, one would not just look at other countries alone, because we are supposed to be the country that sets the pace. Since 1958, when they told us that Oloibiri has afforded the black gold, but for many we do not know, the crude in the Niger Delta was also used to engage during the Second World War. That's a conversation for another day. But they believe that the nation was at its earliest, and that's the reason they did that. So that's a conversation for another day. So I'm simply saying right now that the lesson learned is that following this, it's time for us to hold those responsible accountable. For instance, we're talking about Nigeria that doesn't have an oil or a petroleum minister for the past 12 years. President Muhammadu Buhari sat there and did not choose an expert in that industry to manage it. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu now is doubling as the Minister of Petroleum Resources for Nigeria. These are people who do not have any idea about global best practices and modus operandi in the oil industry. And they are the people sitting there using their ego to kill the industry and not understanding how to speak to the issues. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the Minister of Petroleum Resources because he has not appointed one, and he has not been able to make any statement that reflects an inkling of of professionalism and understanding of the dynamics of crude oil business in the country. The same thing with his predecessor. So how then do we expect a country, and by extension a continent, to benefit from all of the goodies that come with such disruptions? So to me, it's ridiculous, and I think it's time for us to send a citizens' bill that prevents or precludes these people from bringing their ego onto the stage where people are supposed to be employed to do what they're supposed to do. Check across the continent of the world. Every president has a substantive minister of petroleum resources. What is wrong with us here? So we are the only country right now, even on the African continent, that doesn't have somebody who is in charge of the petroleum ministry. Go check Angola, go check Algeria, go check Morocco, go check these countries. Nigeria is the only one. So I think, to me, we have to review all of these shenanigans that make us laughing stock, unknown to us. And even if we know, we have lost the ability to be ashamed of what is not right. And that is why we are not cashing home at this point. And that is why even internally, Dangote is fighting with the respective petroleum industry bodies, because there's no spokesperson to give direction. And the person who is claiming to be the minister doesn't have an idea of how to handle it. That's how I want to open here in this conversation, please.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kunu. Thank you. Magongo, let's come back to you. We're seeing countries change alliance.
Just one thing.
Go ahead.
Chime in from what Kunu has just said.
Go ahead.
It is very, very profound. But according to me, I think in Africa, one of the problems we have is systemic. And we have a certain kind of culture that does not encourage local entrepreneurship, progress. I don't know why I call it an artificial construct. You see, like, for example, what Dangote is trying to do. That is a very novel idea. It's a very good thing, because if I can import oil from Africa instead of getting it from the Middle East or Venezuela, the way I think Kenyan government gets it from. If we can support somebody like Dangote, put the structures in place, make sure we are refining our own Brent crude, we are doing all these things locally, and it's an African thing. We need a more I don't know how I can put it. We need an Africanization program that is going to empower the Africans within us. I can import my fuel from Nigeria, but Nigeria, the kind of corruption that is there, that as Kunu has just put it, that you don't even have a substantive minister who takes care of the ministry. I mean, if you don't have structures in place, how do you expect everything to be streamlined? It is about time that we looked inside ourselves and looked at how we can progress ourselves. It's not all the time we're going to talk about neo-colonialism and all this kind of rubbish.
A safe, sustaining Africa.
Yeah, Magongo, especially because you just said that now, I'm curious to find out, because I agree 100% with both the stances that you both have. Now, in terms of the implementation, when we're looking at the systemic failures that we have in Africa, how do we implement these things? What are the easy steps that we need to put in play in order for us to at least do the bare minimum?
I'm telling you, that is one topic that is close to my heart. But if we decide to talk about that particular topic, we would go on with this topic about the US and whatever. Because the African problem is very, very deep. It's ingrained. It's systematic. We need a complete shift from how we make policies, our electoral processes. It's a political problem. The kind of avarice, the kind of greed that is among us, I know it's crazy. Even in Kenya, we have a president who doesn't give a whatever about his people. I mean, it's so selfish. I would think because the laws are there. In fact, if you ask me, in Kenya, we have over-legislated. I think the same would apply in Nigeria. It's not like the laws are not there. It's the implementation where the problem is. If we put this implementation in place and we put repercussions for mistakes that you do against the people. Because, for example, in our constitution of Kenya, Article 1 says, we, the people, the sovereign. The impression that is created is like these politicians, which I think is like, we have governors here, we have governors in Nigeria. They feel like they're demigods. And yet they're supposed to be our employees. We are the bosses. But that kind of mindset has to trickle down. And it has to come from, it has to start like now going down. From the education system, I don't think there's a country in Africa that has ingrained topics like patriotism and constitutional dispensation and principles from a tender age. When you come up, stealing is wrong. You can't get a president who's like 45, 50 years and you're telling him not to steal. That is like telling somebody, the guy, it's already second nature. We need to change the system. I see how Kun was a bit upset there.
All right.
Because he feels so helpless.
Magungo, thank you very much for that. Kunu, the world is changing. One war is changing ties, alliances, networks, economic or political. Everything seems to be changing now, and people are making adjustments to who their alliances are. Now, in Africa, we are seeing situations where certain relationships are being formed. And I'm wondering when Nigeria should actually pitch its tent that would aid it economically to perhaps take advantage of the situation here, noting that it's an oil-producing country. Is our relationship with America one to be suspicious about, for instance?
Well, I need to first of all say this. And I need you to remember this for as long as God gives you life, that we gravitate towards our source. The reason many African countries gravitate towards the West and now the East, epitomized by China, is because these respective regions have become the sources of our sustenance, whereas the opposite is actually the case. Up until Sudan, and South Sudan parted ways, and South Sudan was created in 2011. China was in charge of 40% of the oil exploration in Sudan. And as I speak, China has been able to have access to very large portions of Sudanese land, the same thing they have done in some part of Nigeria, displacing people in places like Kano, like Agbara, Ogun State, to be able to farm food, eventually get involved in agriculture, start supplying the same thing they use our land to grow to us, and to now become the controllers of the corporate destinies of Nigerians and Africans on the African continent. And that is why it's a criminal thing for anybody who is educated not to participate effectively in the political revamping of the country. It's a disgrace, actually. And that's why when people call themselves political elites, people call themselves journalists of repute, people call themselves all sorts of names, and they go around with their padded shoulders, but we appear not to hear them speak truth to power and act it, we're still going to be stagnated. Now, at the height of the COVID, I'm referring to things of the past because there needs to be a tie back to issues that have actually brought us to this point where we're not able to negotiate our future as a continent effectively. The vestiges of the past are, first of all, disable the unity of the African continent, and that's why you find out that a country like Morocco, at some point in its history, has been applying to become part of Europe because Moroccans believe there are more Europeans than Africa, whereas the same Morocco, when President Muhammadu Buhari was there, wanted to be part of the economic community of West African states. So you see the confusion in identity, that's number one. Number two, Africa has not evolved a system that enables it to trade with itself, because as I speak, it is even less than 50% the kind of trade that Africa does amongst one another, whereas all the resources available in the world to make a continent fully functional is here in the African continent. And let me tell you the ridiculous part. At the 39th summit of the African Union, we had all forms of country from Europe that participated in the African Union 39th summit. I was shocked to my marrows. How could you have Europeans at an African Union meeting? Doing what? Have you ever heard that when the European Union is meeting, we have African countries and presidents there? No, they could invite you to Europe or Asia, but that meeting is exclusively theirs. It tells you that there's a disaster in political leadership in many parts of Africa that has even thrown away the ability to reason by the leaders of this our continent. And that's why I need to say this, that for everybody who has had the privilege of education, excuse me, we have to be determined that we are on a journey to take back this continent from those who appear to be educated, but they lack the onus to represent us. And we have to understand that getting into that position require immense sacrifices and dedication, and even in some cases the loss of our own lives. Because for you to change the status quo,
You have to be ready to lay down your life, or else nothing good will ever happen. And let me say this. When I started this conversation, I talked about gravitating towards the source. The current president of Botswana epitomized that when he was invited recently to the White House. He said he has not responded, and he said, for us as Botswana, we have the gold, and for anybody to invite us, if you need us, you come to us. Nigeria has mineral resources in unquantifiable amounts. We still go out to meet these people, whereas they need what we have. So I think that it's a whole 360 degrees examination of our brains, examination of the things we do, and to call African leaders to order. Many people are desperate, and they are still attending the AU meetings, and nobody is telling them and looking at their face and saying, you should organize elections in your country and stop sitting and changing the election.
Mr. Kunu,
Look at your
Mr. Kunu,
Uganda.
Mr. Kunu.
Oh my goodness.
So, Mr. Kunu,
yes, please. Yes.
With everything that's happening now, and I like that you have laid everything down very, very strategically, does America-Nigeria relationship seem suspicious? I ask that because, well, we all know, and Magongo, you could actually even chime in here. He said, you are a drug dealer, I'm coming to get you. And he captured the Venezuelan president. He said, you have nuclear weapons, I'm coming to get you. And he invaded Iran, even inside of negotiations. He said, you are a Christian genocide country. We're still trapped in that loop. We haven't seen where that's going. So is it a suspicious relationship, noting the oil disruptions that's going on in the entire world right now, and that Nigeria is a strategic country inside of Africa as an oil-producing nation? Mr. Kunu, let's let Magongo go first, and then you could come back to answer that.
That is a foregone conclusion. We know, I mean, with what has happened in the Gaza, we've seen how the Americans and the Israelis are treating Iran. That basically has, and even the war in Ukraine, in Russia and Ukraine, and the European Union, the European Community, sorry, it is hypocrisy of the highest order. Even the ICC itself. Look, I specialize in intellectual property, and most of these things to do with it. Okay, let me put it this way. A brother of mine who lives in the US is a promoter. He promotes his son now. His son is a musician. So after Lion King, they went and patented Hakuna Matata. Hakuna Matata is a Kenyan word that means there's no problem. Hakuna Matata. Hollywood patented that word Hakuna Matata in Lion King. And you cannot patent a language. How can you patent a language Hakuna Matata? So like now we want to do a show for my nephew who's in the US. When it comes to Kenya, we have to do something Hakuna Matata hot fire, something like that. Because they patented that. They started intellectual property, and all the rules and regulations governing intellectual property is them who have set it up. So it is not, those rules, we have not been called on board for us to be stakeholders in this entire thing. The same thing, like I said earlier, about how the prices of petroleum are dictated, even the price of gold. How can the person who sets the price of gold set it up every morning in London, the UK? Zemu says how much the worldwide price is supposed to be. The hypocrisy that is there. We have to decide once and for all to make a significant step to break away from the West. There's nothing significant that they're giving us. Our property, our possessions from Africa is what has built the Western world. Look at what Ibrahim Traore did to France. A cake of uranium was going for $5. I think I'm not very sure about the figure, but during when the French were in Burkina Faso, a cake of uranium was going for about $5. After they were thrown out, they discovered the international price for a cake of uranium is $553. You can imagine the disparity in price. People like right now about cocoa, they don't want us to add value. They want to take our stuff. Look, you look at every American movie, people are talking about coffee. I've not slept. I need coffee. Coffee, I can't. Coffee. You think they grow coffee? They don't grow coffee. Coffee comes from Kenya, Brazil, Ethiopia. Look at chocolate and ice cream. Who's talking about the best people who make those things? The Italians. Why can't we give them a finished product instead of selling them our cocoa seeds? It's a very emotive thing. I get very, very upset about this whole shit.
All right, then, Magonga, we're almost out of time. We really want Mr. Kunu's submission here on that question. Mr. Kunu, real quick, please.
Yes, I only wanted to tell you that there's no country that can dwell in isolation. I think the levers of power and control and the proper utilization of the entire value chain of what belongs to Africa must be exploited advantageously. Even if we decide to take all of our resources and begin to exploit it ourselves, we'll still need buyers. So the relationship between Nigeria and the US is not suspicious to me, and it simply means that the US has seen the loophole and the hypocrisy in the leadership of the country, and that's the reason it has actually coming from the angle it has come in, not necessarily talking about this. For instance, if a country is not decimating non-state actors by itself, a country is not taking advantage and arresting people who should be arrested that are supporting insurgency, you have created a crack in your wall, and that is what perhaps global leaders need to actually say, okay, we're going to take advantage of this and use it against them. For instance, why is it that some of the things that they have brought to our doorstep, they're not taking it to a country like Morocco, they're not taking it to a country like Egypt? It is simply because we have allowed the crack in our walls. Why are they not taking it to a country like Singapore? So I'm simply saying here that whilst we are part of those who believe in Pan-Africanism and that it is possible for Africa to control the levels of power, we also believe that symbiotic relationship where we take advantage and we take the lead with respect to our human and natural resources can be possible. We cannot live independently of others. We need collaboration. We need symbiotic relationship. We need a healthier and more collaborative Africa. And we need to start negotiating as a continent rather than as countries, because that is where the cracks allow a lot of weakening of the strength of the continent. That's how I want to respond to that, please.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I wish we had more time to dissect this because it's a heavy topic. The project called Africa, I think, is everyone's responsibility and right. And it's quite clear that in an interconnected world, distant wars are rarely distant for very long. They travel through energy prices, trade routes, and the economic shocks that eventually reach everyday households. And now for Africa, as well as for Nigeria, the lessons may be simple. Global conflict reminds us how vulnerable economies can be when stability elsewhere begins to crack.
Thank you very much once again to Mr. Magunga and, of course, Mr. Kunu for joining us for that conversation. Let's go on a break. We've got more coming your way inside the South for Breakfast Extra. We'll be back.
Now, in today's big story, Nigeria's security challenges have continued to test the limits of the country's policing system, from banditry to kidnapping and, of course, commercial violence. Many communities say the current structures of centralized policing is struggling to respond quickly enough. This is why the conversation around state police has returned to the national stage. A committee reviewing the framework of state policing has resumed its work, but the idea remains controversial. Supporters say it could bring security closer to communities, while critiques fear political misuse by state government.
So, to help us examine whether state police is truly the solution to Nigeria's insecurity, we are joined by Tony Ofeyeta. That's Dr. Tony Ofeyeta, and he's the Director General of the International Institute of Professional Securities, and also Dr. Steve Okori, Security Consultant. Gentlemen, you are welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It's good to have you here. Now,
thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Grant.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Ofeyeta, I'm going to come to you first. I was wondering, from a professional security standpoint, if you could let us know, is Nigeria's centralized policing structure still effective for the current threats that we're experiencing?
Once again, thank you for having me. I think that question has its own answer inherent in it. The mere fact that we are already advocating for state policing, and that the federal government here had been inundated with the cry and the agitation for state policing, speaks volume about whether the central policing system is effective enough to curb the avalanche of security challenges we have in the country today. And my answer, of course, is to the extent that state policing is long overdue, especially in view of the torrential terrorism, kidnapping, and avalanche of crimes and criminalities, especially in our suburbs, especially in the outskirts, in the villages, and where the numerical strength of the Nigerian police as we speak, understandably, may not be able to get there. And unfortunately, painfully too, because of the underutilization of technology, which of course would have also aided. Today, as we speak now, we have a policing force that is less than 500,000, policing about 250 million human beings. You and I know that is a lot of a challenge. More so, most of the states in the country have already started their own state policing system. The difference as we speak is basically because the law has not allowed them to bear arms, and that is why they are not bearing arms. In Lagos State, you have a lot of them, those that they designate for traffic and transportation management, like the LASMA, the neighborhood Peace Corps is also there, Neighborhood Watch rather is there, Sokoto Marshal is there, Ebubeagu is there. You know, each of these states all over the country, they all have their paramilitary or parasecurity apparatus as we speak today. And they are paying them, they are funding them. The only difference is just to up their training and of course introduce arms into it. And that automatically becomes a state policing thing. So for me, I think that, yes, please.
Now, Dr. Steve Okwori, critiques fear that governors could misuse state police against political opponents. How valid is this concern? Dr. Steve?
Is Dr. Okwori still with us? He might not be with us. Dr. Okwori, we will wait for you to regain a reconnection with us. But let's come back to you, Dr. Ofeata. Do you want to take the question, sir?
Well, the question is whether the governors would abuse or not abuse. Yes. I think the truth is that the creation of state policing has nothing to do with governors' abuse of it. Because as we speak today, if the governor wants the listening ear of the IGP and say, I want 10 policemen, I want to assure you that the IGP most likely will tilt towards their request, except on the condition that maybe that governor or that state is not in good terms with the presidency, or alternatively is not in good terms with the CP. For me, whatever abuse we may think of, modernity, technology is already down within those. Today you have a situation where almost everybody carries camera around through the instrumentality of the phone they are holding. And you would have seen also that police brutality has reduced drastically because of that. So if you are talking about police brutality and all those stuff like that, is there any government that government?
Yeah, but Dr. Ofeata, it's really not about whether police brutality has reduced. It's that when you engage with state policing, the police now comes under the state government. And that means that there are possibilities and risks that they could be taken advantage of. They could be used as apparatus by the governors for whatever reason, especially when it comes to political opposition. So that there is a present fear, and that's been one of the factors people have been pointing toward and saying that this might also not be a great idea at the end of the day. If you have a system where, as it stands now, the police is used as advantage for political parties or big men, then imagine the kind of animal we'll be unleashing when it's a state jurisdiction, if you get what I mean. So do you think that fear is not valid?
I think from the perspective of percentage, the overall good of the state and the overall good of the nation. You are talking about probability. Now the question is whether legislations should be based on probability. And if you look at the probability vis-a-vis criticality, now you want to ask yourself, which most likely is better? Are we talking about the criticality of establishing a state policing or the probability of not establishing a state policing because we believe that the governor will use it against its political enemy. Now the question now is, what is let us assume without conceding that most likely may happen. Now we're all operating on the premise of probability. What is the percentage of these perceived political enemies we are talking about vis-a-vis the overall citizenry of each of the states or of the nation at large? You are talking of a police to the extent of being able to police, effective policing, to reduce crime, eradicate certain crimes. There are certain crimes in Nigeria that must be eradicated, and the eradication is possible. And there are those that have to be reduced. So when you are talking about using the excuse that it may be a political tool, it may be a tool against political adversaries and all those stuff like that, for me, I still think that in contemporary society, it's most likely a lazy man's argument. In view of the fact that we have higher level of security challenges, the higher level of people dying on daily basis, villages are being sacked, people are being maimed.
So let's talk about that. Let's now that you brought that in, let's talk about capacity. You've just mentioned villages being sacked. Now, amongst the crimes that are happening inside of Nigeria that one would say that the police should be on top of would be banditry in the north, insurgency in the northeast, farmer-herder conflicts in the middle belt, kidnappings on highways, and also urban crimes, cult violence in the south. So the big question now is, should we actually be looking at restructuring the police or giving it more capacity? Is the Nigerian police force equipped enough to actually handle these crimes that we just stated here? Let's take a look at banditry in the north, for instance. Do we think that the Nigerian police are capable of handling these situations? Mostly we always bring in the military, the armed forces in these cases. So how will state policing help here?
Okay, let's look at it from the fact that, we're talking about capacity. To me, the police is not short of capacity. It's not short of the intellectual acumen to be able to also face head-on the challenge of banditry, terrorism, and the like. But you look at it from the perspective of the numerical strength and the resources that is at hand. The government, to what extent has the government been able to fund? Let us assume that all the resources going to the Army, to the Navy, to the Air Force for the joint operation is going straight and directly to the police. Do you think that the result will be the same? The answer, of course, is not. But you are talking of a limited resources shared among avalanche and many security agencies and the like. Why? Because the central government is actually the main financier of all the security agencies and the like. But when you departmentalize it to the extent that each state has it at its own main responsibility, and of course, I'm sure that the result will be different. Don't forget that when you talk about this capacity of the police has been able to do excellently well in and out of the country, especially outside the country. You would have seen their capacity severally. But you are talking of a country where you have more ungoverned spaces, because of a lot of factors are actually major contributor to the ineffectiveness of the police activities when it comes to fight against banditry and all those stuff like that. There's the challenge of the culture, there's the challenge of the language, there's the challenge of topography, there's the challenge of even the climate, So all these things are things that the state policing on its own would attend to naturally. Because when you are talking about state policing, it simply means that you are domiciled within your own territory. You understand the language there, you understand the culture there, you understand the topography, you understand you know the streams, you know the God they worship, you know places to go, you know places not to go. You are most likely able to identify foreigners or strangers when they enter your vicinity, and you become accountable to your people, even when you misbehave as a police officer. They can identify you, they know where you stay, they know your parents, they know your genealogy. So at that point in time, there are a lot of things that, interwoven together to make it a robust thing. Once we are able to have a template that is going to start on a good and professional ground, for me, it's not a matter of whether the police is capable. They are quite capable. But events and circumstances now has shifted from the issue of having a central policing system. It is extremely overwhelming. Their numerical strength is not capable of doing that. Their financial resources is not capable of doing that. And of course, like I said, the other factors we talk about, culture and all those stuff like that, are major inhibiting factors. So if we've had state policing, and you now have a governor is not going to go to the federal government to begin to beg cap in hand to say that the state should be protected and wait for federal government to order the IGP to deploy policemen like we have in cases like Benue State and Plateau State and all those stuff, where they have to wait for the federal government or the IGP to deploy men. They have to beg and all those stuff. Because you as a governor, you become answerable directly to your people, especially
all right,
when
Doctor.
it comes to security.
All right, Dr.
Yes.
Ofeatan, thank you. Let's reintroduce Dr. Steve Okore, who's rejoined us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Dr. Steve, I beg to differ with regards to the capabilities, but I think that's a question that will come into before we let you go, should we have the time. Would state police truly improve response time and intelligence gatherings at the community levels? Dr. Steve?
Oh. Once again, his network has undone us. Hopefully, we might be able to get him. But
you can't hear me?
No,
we can hear you.
Now we can. Now we can. Go ahead now.
Okay. Sorry about the network from Abuja. I don't know what's happening to it.
Okay.
I think with regards to the state police creation and establishment, my Oga there, Dr. Ofeatan, has said a lot. I was listening to him vision here. State police, I think the whole idea about state police is to see that we have presence of security in our communities. And of course, you agree with me that most of these violent attacks happen in our very remote communities where we don't have security presence. And that is why the perpetrators or these criminals usually have their field day when they go to attack innocent Nigerians, either in their sleep or going about their lawful businesses. The whole idea about it is that let us have presence of security in our rural communities. But my worry here is the implementation. We come up with a lot of policies and all that, but implementing it and sustaining these policies is an area where you are talking about state police. How well will they be equipped? Because if they are not equipped with arms and ammunition, they cannot confront these criminals when they come to attack our people, right? They will not be effective, and you will see a whole lot of inefficiency, and they will not be able to see how to carry out the whole idea, the essence why they have been established. Now, Nigerian police, the federal police is about 96 years old. We are still being confronted with lack of funds, lack of training, lack of technology, lack of enough manpower and all that. These are challenges that the federal government itself cannot even address. We're talking about state police. How many states are viable enough to be able to help address these issues? Because if they are not armed, if they are not well trained, if they don't use technology to be able to track the movement of these criminal elements from one location to another, surveillance equipment to know where they are, when they carry out these acts of criminality, then the whole essence is defeated, right? So going forward, let us see that a whole lot is on the template. I am aware that the IGP has constituted a committee, right, to look into the establishment of state police. But I think that we are putting the cat before the horse, because we need to look at the constitutional availability, how and where we can be able to address these issues. When you look at section 214 of our constitution, that section needs to be amended to be able to accommodate the creation or establishment of state police. So I think that we would have gone ahead to see what the National Assembly will do in that regard before we begin to talk about a committee, right, that has to do with the implementation of state police. You see, we're talking about state police here, and the IG has constituted a committee, all made up of retired CPs and ACPs and all that, right? So we're talking about, I think that the IGP should have gone beyond that scope, right? Involves private security consultants, critical stakeholders in that committee. It's not a police affair committee looking at it. It is supposed to be an all-encompassing critical stakeholders in that committee.
Dr. Okore.
What I've said is that let us first of all address the issue looking at the Constitution. Once that is done, then we can begin to talk about implementation.
All right, now, Dr. Okori, a very interesting input there that you did, and I liked it because it's bringing me to this question now. Is the Nigerian police actually ready to be decentralized when it comes to, we've talked about capacity, when it comes to ability, when it comes to training? And whose responsibility would it be when it becomes state policing? Would it be the responsibility of the states to now train the Nigerian police? Because there's so much about the Nigerian police out there that's adverse. People do not trust the Nigerian police, yet this is the same police that we're about to, well, decentralize and send to states. Do we need to retrain? What kind of processes would the recruiting process be? What do we need to take a look at first? Like you said, perhaps it's the cart before the horse. But what needs to be done, exactly what definitively needs to be done before we now start engaging state police? Dr. Okori.
We have to look at the Constitution, Section 214. Tony Efayoto is a lawyer. He knows that section that I'm talking about. We must see how to tinker with that section. We must see how to, first of all, amend that section, right? And that is why you see Mr. President, each time he has or he finds himself in a forum with other governors or National Assembly members, he kept emphasizing about creation of state police because he knows that the National Assembly, first of all, needs to amend that constitution. That is one. Now, before that, this has to do with states, right? So the committee set up by the IGP, I don't think they have any critical role to play at this point in time, right? How many governors are going to be the financiers of state police in their various states, right? They are the ones that will pay, they are the ones that will train, they are the ones that will buy arms and ammunition, they are the ones.
All right, Dr. Okori, we're finding it difficult to hear you. Dr. Okori, we're finding it difficult to hear you. We're going to advise that you shut off your visuals or video and let's manage with just the audio. I think it will be clearer then, and then you can continue, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I think we have lost him there. But let's come back to Dr. Ofeyeta. And the same question here, is the Nigerian police disciplined enough to be decentralized at this point, or does it require further training, and whose responsibility would that be?
I think the first thing is to first of all decentralize the policing system. Like the president has also expressed, the issue of training, it's a product of many things. One, the security need of each locality will be identified. The funding would also be highly instrumental. The infrastructure, then you now talk about the training. The training, there's nothing special about training when it comes to re-policing training, because you are talking about, there are different aspects of the training. It's not just the physical drill, the warfare or counter-terrorism drills and all those stuff like that. You also have, the academic part of it or the professional part of it, which is basically done in the classroom, talking about human rights abuses, the position of the law and all those stuff like that. We are not short of trainers in this country at all. At whatever level, we are not short of trainers. And the main thing is to what extent will they be equipped is a product of the funding that is available to them. But what I know very well is that each state that is serious about it will definitely have its own internal mechanism to be able to up its game, to be able to train its personnel at every professional level and at each category. The first thing is that we then don't forget that whatever the state policing system we are talking about, it's not going to erode the federal policing system, except for the fact that you now have jurisdiction being identified. There are domestic crimes that will be left for the state police. There are crimes that, for example, like the inter-border, border-related crimes, custom-related crimes, and all those stuff like that. Even terrorism at certain level, or financial crimes that has to do with government currencies and the like, they will all still be domiciled with the state police. So it's not with the federal police, sorry. It's not as if everything, when you talk about state policing, that every aspect of security is now going to be transferred to the state police. No, not at all. We are talking basically of issues that have to do with community crime. We are talking of issues that has to do with domesticated crime within each locality. It becomes easier for it becomes easier for what do you call it now? Response timing become very fast. When it comes to decision making, the commissioner of police or the director of policing in that state become directly answerable. He just has one structure, and that is the structure of the governor to call for approval, and that's all. It's not going to move from the governor to the AIG to the DIG before getting to the IG and all those stuff like that. That structure would have automatically collapsed, and that will help response timing. Then, of course, you are not talking of a situation where security becomes competitive among states. Because when you see that Lagos State is doing very well, you are seeing the innovation that is coming from Lagos, that is coming from Delta, that is coming maybe from Kano, that is coming from maybe from River State and all those stuff like that. As a governor, you also want to, key into some of those innovations. You also want to bring out your own innovation. At the end of the day, security becomes positively competitive. So it's not, to me, as far as I'm concerned, the advantages for now outweighs the disadvantages. But I agree with Steve on one thing, and I think that I will crave the indulgence of the IGP to revisit the constitution of the police committee. The police committee should actually, for me, as far as I'm concerned, should be predominantly professionals that are outside the policing system. Now, because what happened in most regimented systems is this. If I'm a police officer and the IG asks me to be part of a committee, I am most likely going to be extremely careful about what I'm going to recommend. I want to first of all understand the psychology of my IG. I want to know where he tilts towards, so that my recommendation will align with his expectation. And that is not the best of all. And that, unfortunately, is what happened in regimented services, whether it is military, whether it is police, army, navy, NSCDC, and the like. You cannot go at variance with the expectation of your boss. But if you have core professionals, they would give you a professional template, global professional template. They will identify the merit and the demerit of each of the policies and each of the structures that are placed on ground before you. Now that makes it easier for you to present a robust presentation before Mr. President at the end of the day. But when you are now done it exclusively as a police affair, this is not a police affair. It's a federal government affair. In actual fact, it is an affair that affects the citizenry, the civilians, much more than the police. So I want to crave the indulgence of our new IGP, Olatunji Dusu, to look at the constitution of that committee again and bring in professionals from all over the country. Look at people you know that have cut their teeth in the industry and bring them. They may not be more than 3, 4, or 5, depending on his discretion. And it costs the police next to nothing to do that. Rather, it's an advantage because you are going to be seeing people that are going to be thinking outside the box. But the committee that we have now is most likely going to be thinking and formulating policy within the box.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, it's quite clear. Thank you so much for your insight, and Mr. Steve as well, who we lost earlier. Security is ultimately about trust. A trust that when danger appears, the system designed to protect citizens will show up equipped and adequately intact. Thank you so much for your time and your insight on that. Mazino, we go on a quick break, but when we return, we bring you more stories right here on News Central. Stay with us. Now, across Nigeria and much of Africa, uterine fibroids affects millions of women, yet the condition is still widely misunderstood. Fibroids are non-cancerous growths that develop in and around the uterus. And while some women experience no symptoms, others deal with severe pain, heavy bleeding, infertility, and complications during pregnancy. Now, medical studies show that women of African descent are more likely to develop fibroids, often at a younger age and sometimes more severe symptoms. Now, despite this, many women delay setting or seeking treatment because they assume painful periods or excessive bleeding is normal.
The result is that fibroids often remain a silent struggle, affecting not just physical health, but emotional well-being, family planning, and equally the quality of life. So to help us better understand the conditions and the importance of early awareness, we are joined by Adeola Olunloyo. She is a public health professional and also someone who's had the experience of actually living with fibroids. You're welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
We had you on the last time, but it was for a different reason.
Yes.
This time we're talking about fibroids here.
Yes.
Very interesting bit that Inam revealed inside of the introduction to this segment here, that Africans are actually more susceptible to these. I'd like that answered. But first, let's start with the stats. What are we looking at when it comes to Nigeria and the cases of fibroids?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's important to note that Nigeria doesn't have a national data on fibroids. However, clinical studies show that about 45% of women are living with fibroids in Nigeria. 45%.
No, that's almost 50%.
That's like a conservative estimate because there are still many women who are not diagnosed because they don't have symptoms.
Wow.
Yeah, so if a woman doesn't come into the clinic to report symptoms that are adversely affecting her, she won't know that she has fibroids. So we're thinking it's more than 45%.
Let's also remember to mention that this segment is geared toward the fact that tomorrow is International Women's Day and all of March is Women's Month.
Yeah.
As men, we don't get that much, but it's okay. Now back to why Africans seem to be more prone to fibroids.
Okay, to be honest, there is no specific data or science telling us why. And part of the reason why there's a campaign ongoing now is to throw more light to say the burden of fibroid is huge, not just in Africa, but globally. However, there's little or no investment made in researching to understand why, for instance, it's 2 to 3 times more prevalent among Black women than white women. You know, there are certain suggestions around genetic predisposition, environmental or dietary factors, but it's not really nailing it because there's still not a lot of investment around research. Yeah.
Oh, this is a very deep one. Now, in terms of symptoms, and I think it's quite critical for us to note, because when you're looking at the uterus or the reproductive system of a woman, in Nigeria especially, you tend to find that there's so many different aspects. You've got the PCOS, you've got a number of them. So let's look at the symptoms that indicate fibroids. Can you?
Okay, I can use my lived experience as an example,
Okay,
but what's commonly shown is painful periods.
Okay.
And I like the fact that you said at the introduction that many women suffer this in silence because right from when we were young, for instance, when I started my period at 10, I started having dysmenorrhea, which is painful periods. And what I keep hearing is, it's normal, you're a woman. This is part of womanhood. You're supposed to feel pain when you're getting pregnant or when you're having your period. So many women silently go through fibroids without knowing that they have fibroids because we've been conditioned to suffer or manage the pain. And then there's excessive bleeding. For instance, when mine got really bad, I was bleeding for 12 days. And I was having very heavy periods. Now, as a public health professional, my work required me traveling a lot. So it used to make me very apprehensive. If I have to travel or I'm conducting a training or I'm working in communities, when I'm on my period, it's very distressing. For instance, if I don't have access to sanitary bathroom or there's no water to clean up, it's a lot. And I've had women even tell me sometimes they're in a conversation and they cough and a clump just, comes out. Or a woman sits down, goes somewhere, by the time she's getting up, she's soaked. So it's very embarrassing when you have women who can control, the excessive bleeding that they have. And of course, the other one which is very prominent is it distorts the uterine cavity. You see a lot of women who are looking pregnant, but they are not pregnant. So people are like, oh, congratulations, madam, and then people are waiting for her to deliver, but she's not delivering because she has fibroids. So those are just a few.
Now, I've had a few friends who have had the issue with fibroids, and oddly enough, some of them you tend to find that this becomes something that's indicated when they're trying to get pregnant. Other than that, like you said, it's a we will manage it kind of situation. How then do we decipher between the various situations that might be, plaguing a woman?
You cross out. Cross that out, cross that out.
How do we, what? Sorry, I didn't get that.
I would imagine you're saying, how do you cross out any other factors that you...
Well, early diagnosis helps. But you find that most Nigerians have poor health-seeking behavior. You don't go to the hospital until you're dying.
So I actually want to button on this early diagnosis that you mentioned. There, again, piggybacking from friends, you've had women have instances where they have indications or markers for fibroids, but then they're advised that, no, these are still small, let's wait for them to grow. Is that?
So that's like a cultural conditioning, like I said, where you think something that is, where you normalize what is abnormal. For instance, if you are bleeding more than 5 days, it's abnormal. You should seek help. If you are in critical pain where you can't function or be productive during your period, it's abnormal and should not be normalized. And it also shouldn't be when you are trying to conceive that you find out. You should have, a lifestyle where you are being checked for your, gynecology or reproductive health regularly, the same way you do your annual checks for, your blood tests and stuff like that. So if it's not caught early, you don't even know you have it until it's advanced. And then there's also the issue of fear. Even when women feel that there's something wrong, they don't want to be labeled with fibroids because they feel like it's a death sentence. And that emanates from the fact that, many women know at least one person who has passed from having a fibroid surgery in Nigeria. From the surgery. So even when they suspect or think that they have it, they would rather manage it than go to the hospital where they will tell them they have to go through the surgery. So there's that morbid fear.
How could it be that there could be a case where a person dies from the surgery?
Go to that question as well.
Well, we have complications. I mean, I would say that we've gone far in advance and in technology that is being used to operate fibroids, over the years. But in the past, we had cases where complications will arise and then,
Let's talk about your instance, if you don't mind. You've been through this.
Yeah.
You've had one operation.
Yeah.
Tell us about it, exactly what happens at these operations and what the possibilities of a recurrence could be after an operation, because I hear that it could grow back.
Yeah.
Benign, yet it could come back.
Yes. So I lived with fibroids for 13 years. I was diagnosed. I didn't do my surgery until 13 years after being diagnosed.
Wow.
And I suspect that I had it even before being diagnosed because, like I told you, I always had period pains. I always had heavy bleedings, and I thought it was normal until I was around like 30 that I said, oh, this is becoming too much when I started to have heavy.
30?
Yeah. That was when I took myself to the hospital to say, look, I'm having this problem. Can you check what's going on?
So you're 30 at this point, so that means if you've had it for... Oh, that was when you went to the hospital, so you only got the surgery...
To report myself and say, I have a problem.
Okay.
And then we now started managing it. You remember the syndrome of managing?
For 13 years?
For 13 years. Because you know what? The strange thing that I was told then was, because you're not yet married and you've not had children, don't think about the surgery yet. Just leave it and
This is what they told. They told a friend of mine the same thing.
And I find it preposterous,
So
especially
you have kids within that time?
I don't have kids as I'm speaking to you, but I didn't have kids then. But later on, I was like, how did I allow myself to suffer for 13 years? It has nothing to do with whether I can have babies or I don't have babies. Because until I got to the point where I said, you know what, I cannot live like this again. I want to have a quality of life regardless of whether I have kids or I don't have kids. I want to be alive today. I want to be happy today. I want to have
healthy.
you know what I mean? And that's when I decided firmly to say, look, I'm going ahead with the surgery. But here's the thing, because I hadn't had kids, okay, the truth of the matter is when I first thought about the surgery, I wanted a hysterectomy because I said, I don't even want to have periods anymore. I'm tired. I've been menstruating since I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
And by that time, I was 42. I'm like, you know what, enough. I was so angry,
You should define what a hysterectomy is, actually.
Oh, that's taking out the womb.
removal of the womb.
Yeah, or even the ovaries, everything around the reproductive system.
Now
so
back
I was
to anatomy.
angry enough to say that's what I wanted.
So back to anatomy, these are the organs responsible for the growths of these benign...
The womb,
the uterus.
The uterus is the main organ that houses the fibroids, and that's where a baby grows.
Okay.
The fallopian tubes, ovaries are responsible for, releasing the egg that is fertilized and stuff like that, and the egg travels through the fallopian tubes to get to the womb.
Were you?
I was.
But then, so let's talk about fibroids and childbirth. Does it mean when you have or have been diagnosed with fibroids, does it mean that, is there a risk of not having children?
Or complication even.
Or complications
so,
when it comes to children?
Factually, fibroids is not the most common reason for infertility, but a significant factor contributing to infertility.
Also.
For instance, you have PCOS, which is more prominent. You have male factor infertility, which is more prominent. You have endometriosis, but fibroids maybe accounts for like 15 to 20% of infertility cases, right? Yeah, but it also still adversely affects women when they are troubled and they can't conceive, because of course, when you have a big tumor growing inside of you and displacing the baby, or not even allowing the embryo to be implanted or to develop, so it causes miscarriages, it causes hemorrhage, it distorts, it just makes it difficult for a woman to get pregnant if she's having, fibroids and she's trying to conceive. However, there are women who have had children who also still have fibroids. And they have to make the decision to say, you know what, I'm done having children.
So
maybe
just
remove the womb because I'm not going to be using it. But for a woman who has not had children, then the medical personnel has to tailor whatever options they have to suit her own fertility status, because if she still wants to have children, then you now have to start looking at other options. But I didn't really still understand why I was being told to manage it and wait and not have the surgery, perhaps because they know it grows back. So I had my surgery in 2023, and then last year, when I still went for a scan, I was told that I have one fibroid growing again.
Oh dear.
2 centimeters. So it's true to say that it grows back.
How does that make you feel?
Regretful in a way that I didn't take out, that I didn't have the hysterectomy. But for now, because I had the
regretful.
I'm just tired. Okay. Do you get what I mean? I don't want to revisit going back to what I went through. But right now I'm okay. My menstrual cycle is stable, and I'm not in distress like I was when I had the first surgery in 2023. So I'm hoping, my doctor says menopause is around the corner, that I probably won't get to the stage where I have to do another procedure.
You mentioned not having kids.
Yeah.
You still do not have kids.
I don't have kids, and I'm not married.
You'd not desire to have kids?
Oh, I've tried, and that was that's a different conversation, a different story. Right. Because I've had attempts to use IVF to have babies, but it wasn't successful.
Now, was that could the fibroids have been a contributing factor to the failure of the IVF?
And well, scientifically, fibroids affect the success rate of IVF. But in my case, I actually did not want to carry the baby because at the time I still had fibroids, and I actually had fibroids and adenomyosis, and I still have adenomyosis, and that's completely different from fibroids. Adenomyosis grows in the uterine, it covers the entire uterine lining, right? It doesn't grow out like a tumor, but it's embedded and also causes, pain and bleeding.
I'd like our viewers to know that you actually are willing to talk about this. We had this conversation from before, so it's not like as if we're badgering and
oh no! Honestly, I
been an advocate.
I wish we had an audience, or our producers could, check our YouTube and see if they've got questions.
Because there will be many questions.
Women, like I said, in a group of 10, 1, maybe even 3 in 10 women.
You remember what she said?
We're talking about 4, almost 4 or 5 out of 10 women are affected.
Mazino, I mean, it's crazy in such a way that you'll have a conversation with someone and they'll say, "Oh no, I was not around. Where were you? I was in hospital. Oh, you're not feeling well? No, I have fibroids. Or my wife is not feeling well. Oh, is she okay? Oh,
it's rampant and it's quiet. And guess what? A lot of women now are also having hysterectomies. Silently. Because there's this taboo around, you are not a complete woman if you don't have a womb.
I mean, it's between me and you. You don't know.
I don't even care. I'm just saying, if we don't talk more about it, and if more women do not share their story, which is why I actually want to commend Lupita Nyong'o. She has started a campaign. You saw it, Make Fibroids Count. I also did it, and I said I was going to use that as a leverage to share my own story, because there's so much to unpack around women's reproductive health. But the silence and the low or no investment in women's health, has to change. And that's what Lupita is trying to drive home.
It's a very good drive, very good endeavor. But One thing I'd like to ask, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there who have this question in mind, and they're hoping that somebody could bring it up. What is the worst that could happen when you choose not to take out the fibroids? Does it affect your standard of life, your mode of living?
Absolutely. It affects your quality of life. Like I told you, I got to the point where I hated myself. I hated my body. Because
what does it manifest as?
I mean, bloating, she had mentioned
anxiety.
You look pregnant.
We don't even look at the mental impact. We're looking at, if we look at the physical, it's not normal for me to, for instance, be on stage here if I'm on my period and I'm scared that I'm going to soil myself. I didn't have access to the right sanitary pads. I always had to buy imported pads, and if I run out of supplies, I'm in trouble. There are women who are using adult diapers for their periods because the normal regular pads cannot survive. And now imagine this women who are poor and lack access to these sanitary pads, what they go through. They may not even have to, they may not be able to walk or go out when they are having their period. So the effects really, it doesn't make sense for you to live like that.
Still talking about the effect on a woman.
Yeah.
Now, if you have to, if it affects your menstrual cycle, that means you're losing blood. Does that make you anemic?
Of course. Yes. One of the effects is anemia, dizziness.
This manifests as what? Loss
iron
of weight?
deficiency,
fatigue, unproductivity, and even it affects intimacy in marriage. If a woman is going through all of that, you think she wants her husband to touch her or she wants anybody to come near her, and this can put a strain in the marriage, And then we talked about infertility again. It can also affect it. It affects her going to work. If she can't walk because she's not productive, she's not in the right frame days. Exactly.
This would be a good call for the authorities to assist. So what policies do we have on ground that assist women who are living with fibroids or want to have operations to get them out?
I am not aware of any policy. And one of the things I would like to appeal to our current Minister of Health, Professor Mohammed Ali Pate, who happens to also be a renowned and respected global health leader, is to include, free access to fertility care in the national
and sanitary material.
Yeah. And I mean into national health insurance, because many women cannot afford fibroid surgery. I was very lucky. I was working in a good organization that gave me health insurance, so I didn't have to pay. But it's really expensive and unaffordable for women.
What would it cost to have such a surgery?
There's been inflation. You could be looking at between what?
3 million plus.
3 million plus, or less if it's a government hospital. But if it's private, you can pay more depending on, because every woman's case is different, how complicated it is, where the fibroid is located,
how big, how many,
big, and all of those things. So
I was privy to some information
can't.
about Lagos State actually assisting women, especially at Lagos State University, if I'm not mistaken. But this was very many years ago. It was about 8 to 7 years ago. I don't know if it still stands now, but they were able to actually go get diagnosed and perhaps also get assisted if it comes to the operation itself. So that seems to be that if there's no awareness for that, or if it doesn't exist at all, then there seems to be a gap.
There is
as a public health professional, are NGOs jumping in? Are individuals jumping in? Who is championing the cause to help women with fibroids?
To be very honest, fibroids is a neglected area of reproductive health. Nobody is dealing with it. Nobody is supporting it. Nobody is funding it. And which is why I feel strongly, or I'm recommending strongly, that Nigeria has the opportunity to lead the way in Africa, because we are the largest, the most populous black nation, which means the burden of fibroid is huge in Nigeria. We have the opportunity to lead when it comes to fibroid research, mobilizing resources and funds and stakeholders under the leadership of the Minister of Health to get more funds to focus on fibroids research, because we even need to know the simple question you asked me: why is it higher among black women? We have rich data in Nigeria because our health system has decades of experience managing fibroids, performing fibroid surgeries, and our doctors are among the best when it comes to surgeries. I'll make you laugh. In 2016, before I had my surgery in 2023, I actually went to the US to get my surgery done, because I wanted a minimally invasive option, which is called the laparoscopic myomectomy, which means they won't open me. They won't open me up. But guess what? The doctor that I went to see didn't know fibroids.
Oh. No.
And I was botched.
Are you serious?
I came back with more complications than I left.
No.
And I had to get my fibroids surgery done in Nigeria. I'm telling you. So
there's
going abroad is not guarantee for you to get better access, except you've done your research to be sure that the doctor you are going to see has managed black women with fibroids extensively. Otherwise, if you fall into the wrong hand, it's
I don't know, Inam, if you...
So my point is, Nigeria has every opportunity to lead in this research, to take the lead, raise funds, study, because we have a large pool of women who have been managed or who are being managed and who are still going to be diagnosed, so that we can study the profile to see what the patterns are and understand how we can manage.
Your jaw was on the floor for a
curious
very
to
long
know,
time.
especially with that being said now, of course, it's science. Is there, based on research that's available and maybe some that you've done for yourself, do we actually know the cause of fibroid?
We don't. They're just suggestions. Like we say, genetic dispositions, hormonal imbalance, environmental or dietary. They are just suggestions. There's no factual research nailing it to say this is the real cause.
Okay, one more before I go, before they kill me in my ear. Let's look at fibroids and let's look at ovarian cysts. How do these differ?
Ovarian cyst is completely different. I'm not a medical doctor, so I won't be able to give too much details on ovarian cyst, but it's completely different.
Okay.
Yeah, the way, the ovaries are affected with ovarian cyst, but with fibroids, it's in the uterus.
Okay.
The ovarian cyst is not in the uterus.
Okay.
Yeah, and ovarian cyst can affect maybe the eggs being released and stuff like that.
Okay. Any
Oh, wow.
Inam?
I mean, I have a lot, but they're yelling in my ear, telling me that no more questions.
Hence my sarcasm. But thank you very much, Diola, and thank you very much for also opening up and telling about your experience as well, because it's not something people do very easily.
Yeah.
But you're advocating for this, and I'd like to say more grease to your elbow, and I hope that at least the attention comes to the issue of women and fibroids in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Very good conversation.
Stay tuned. We've got at least one more hour here for Breakfast Extra. We'll be right back.
You're welcome back to Breakfast Extra. Today's actually a very interesting day because we're still dissecting health matters, and our sexual health is where we're going, where that remains one of the most important but often overlooked aspects of public health. Across the world and increasingly in Nigeria, sexually transmitted infections are rising, particularly among young people. It shocked me. Health advocates say the problem is not only about behavior, but also about the awareness. Many infections go undiagnosed because people are afraid to seek testing or lack access to reliable information about prevention as well as the treatments.
Now, events like STI Awareness Week and also International Condom Day are designed to change that narrative. The goal is simple: encourage open conversation about sexual health, promote safe practices, and reduce the stigma that often surrounds testings and also treatment. To guide us through this conversation, we are joined by Owen Omojo, CEO of HIGC Health Consultants. Watch it, she has no filter. You're welcome. Good to have you here.
Same here. Good to be back.
It's been a while since you've been on the show, unless I wasn't here the last time you were here.
It has been a while.
I always look forward to having you here.
Same here.
Let's talk about it.
Thank you. Well. Thank you.
Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about, but that's actually...
You know what just came to my mind?
I remember the 1990s.
The song.
Yeah, that was intentional.
Yeah, but I mean, sex is important, so yeah.
Yes.
Let us talk about it.
When it comes to STIs, you can't discuss STIs without sex. What's happening in Nigeria? Because I remember sometime in the early 20s, it was recorded that we're having reduced numbers or records of STIs. And it seems to be going up all over again. What exactly could be responsible, Doctor?
Okay, so thank you very much once again for having me. I think, first of all, there is a gap in reporting. And so reporting is increasing now. And so that could be responsible for why it appears that the numbers are going up. Yes, we do have a high STI burden in Nigeria. One of the highest globally, and of course in sub-Saharan Africa and globally. Of course, we're nowhere near South Africa.
Why did you look at me when you said that?
We're nowhere near.
I told you she had no filters. I warned you before we started. But go on.
We're nowhere near South Africa when it comes to STIs and STDs, like specifically HIV. But we are one of the highest globally, and I think largely what is responsible for that is, one, awareness, two, so 3 pillars: awareness, prevention, and early detection. And when we talk about awareness, it's important to tie in stigma, right? Because that's largely why a lot of people are not getting tested, right? So awareness, prevention, and early detection, those are the 3 pillars that I would say.
I'd like to say culture as well, because in our culture, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about safe sex.
Unfortunately, in our culture, sex education is viewed more as a moral issue as opposed to a health care issue. And so from a public health perspective, it's important to emphasize that sexual health is a health care concern, right? It falls under the umbrella of healthcare. And the more we continue to dissuade people from viewing sex, which is a normal human occurrence, right? The more we dissuade people from looking at sex or sexual health as a moral issue and tilt towards looking at it more as a healthcare issue, because good sexual health is integral to overall health and well-being, then I think we can make some good strides in reducing the burden of STIs.
Our South African representative has a question.
Could it be that, especially in Africa, when we speak about the culture and the conditioning as well, that one of the reasons why you find the reporting, I know that you said the reporting is a little bit higher now, and I think it's because of the generation that we're in, but could it be that in Africa, generally, sex or intercourse is something that's supposed to be done when people are married, and you find in situations that many people are engaging in this activity outside of marriage? So could it be that people are afraid to report it because they would be judged in clinics and in the homes that they are practicing coitus?
Yeah, coitus. Yes, oh, definitely. I think in the context that we're speaking in, so in Nigeria and in Africa generally, we have to take into cognizance the social, cultural, religious dimensions of it. And that's why I mentioned earlier that it's often looked at as a moral issue, right, as opposed to a healthcare issue. And so, yes, our culture does preach or push for people to be married before they engage in sexual intercourse. But we must be realistic and understand that many young adults are sexually active, so we can't play ostrich and bury our heads in the sand and act like it's not happening. It is happening, and so what can we do is to get ahead of it and ensure that we're providing young adults and adults in general with the tools that they need to prevent STIs. And that's why I'm very specific on the 3 pillars of awareness, prevention, and early testing. And so we need to be talking to young adults. We need to be preaching the need for early testing. We need to be preaching the need. Yes, when we're talking about prevention, the only proof or the foolproof 100% way to prevent STIs is abstinence. Yes. And so I think that somewhat ties back into why in this context we preach about, you know, abstinence before marriage and things like that, because obviously when you abstain, then you don't get, yes, you protect yourself essentially, but again, abstinence cannot be the only way. So for consenting adults who want to engage in sexual intercourse before marriage, they need to understand what are the things that they need to do to prevent STIs and ensure that they're safe and maintaining good sexual health.
Now that you said that, what does data show when it comes to the numbers of people who are infected with STIs in Nigeria? Are these young adults, mid-aged adults, or older adults? Where is it? Because that's a factor to helping the situation, isn't it?
Absolutely. So in Nigeria, The age range for people who are more at risk of getting STIs or getting infected with STIs are young adults between the ages of 15 to 24. And I know it's surprising that at the age of 15, but then again, we do have teenagers that are becoming sexually active at a young age, so between 15 to 24. But then, of course, it's still quite common in older people as well. So they're more at risk.
16 to 24, though. 15
to 24. 15 to 24.
Is there further data that shows whether it's mostly what gender it is?
Well, mostly male, but then I mean it's pretty much on par. It's pretty much on par. And globally, according to the World Health Organization, every single day there's at least 1 million new STI infection every single day globally, right? And 374 million new STI infections are happening annually globally. 374 million. 374 million. Like, just think about that. That every year globally there are 374 million at least new STI infections. And unfortunately, a lot of these are from curable STIs, right? So amongst these are gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, trichomoniasis, and those are curable STIs. Unfortunately, people are not getting tested on time, and we always say that prevention is better than cure. And when you delay testing, then it leads to STDs, so like the disease part of it, and other complications, so things like male and female infertility, and certain cancers as well. And so I cannot overemphasize the importance of prevention and early testing.
But what about the authorities? What about government? What about the states? Are they doing anything in particular to help the situation?
I think largely I would say one of the major barriers, so I'll say two of the major barriers to early testing is, one, we already talked about stigma, right? And the stigma, unfortunately, doesn't only come from society, it also comes from healthcare professionals. And the second thing is access to these services, because we know that healthcare increasingly is becoming a luxury commodity, so to speak, because people are prioritizing food and shelter over healthcare,
or alternative medicine,
which is not all in itself bad. I think it's just about improving investments in research, in research for alternative medicine. And so the government, I mean, there are government facilities where people can go to get tested, and the frequency is, it's advised at least once a year for adults who are sexually active and who have multiple partners. But it's also important to emphasize that it is responsible sexual behavior is important. Avoid having multiple sex partners, and encourage having open conversations with your sexual partner about getting tested before having unprotected sex, right? So getting tested, and luckily we do have test kits now that are available, that you can actually do the test yourself.
Okay.
Yes, that you can buy at the pharmacy if you don't want, for whatever reason, you don't want to visit a healthcare facility.
Why wouldn't I want to visit the healthcare facility?
Well, remember I talked about stigma. And it also comes from healthcare professionals.
Yes.
A friend of mine was telling me a story recently. He was at a pharmacy, and a young, probably about 19, 20 couple, they walked into the pharmacy and they wanted to buy condoms. And he said the way, there's a way you can judge someone with your eyes.
Yeah.
Without actually saying anything, right? And he said the way the pharmacist looked at them and judged them, like it was
kids.
Yeah. Do you understand? And even the interaction was just so cringe. And after they left, after they walked out, I think my friend said he bought. He eventually paid for the condoms, and after they walked out, my friend had to speak with the pharmacist and say, "You don't do that." You don't do that. What they're doing is responsible.
For why they don't come and get the necessary.
Exactly. So it's important that we take away stigma, right, and encourage people who are seeking, responsible ways to prevent STIs. It's important that we encourage them and we don't stigmatize them. That's really, really important. So yeah.
Very interesting. But I'm hoping how this little forum that we have here is going to help anybody that's listening. Yes, we're advocating that there be less stigma and that people pay attention to their sexual health with habits, by change of habits and all. But for anybody who absolutely needs more information about STIs, where can they go? Is there any secure, safe place? And I do mean safe place very intentionally, that people can go to get information or give information about what's happening to them or a community.
Okay, so again, thanks to News Central TV, because this is an amazing platform to create the awareness, which is one of the critical pillars for for preventing STIs or reducing the burden of STIs, right? So this is a great platform. There are also resources that can be gotten on the WHO website and across public health consulting firms as well, so like HIGC Health Consultants. We do a lot of public health advocacy and things like that, and so you can go to our social media handles for that. And this is not advertisement, Mazino. I do not like the way you're looking at me, but I am.
No, we don't judge people like you judge people. So.
There's a lot of awareness there, out there. So World Health Organization, UNAIDS as well on their social media platforms and of course on their website as well. And then of course your primary healthcare centers, that's like the closest, point of access to care for any community. At the community level. Community health pharmacies as well, so the retail pharmacies, they're also an important part of the value chain that help with health promotion as well, because we're always preaching from a public health perspective, we're always preaching about prevention, and so those are places that they can go to for access to healthcare. And luckily with AI now, we have a lot of telemedicine platforms. AI telemedicine platforms as well, that you can actually go and get verified information and not rely necessarily on Dr. Google, right, to get some of those things, because again, there are so many myths out there, right? And unfortunately, like Dr. Google now, like can just you have a rash on your genital and you go to Dr. Google and it gives you like $1 million and you're already panicking, and that fear inhibits you from actually going to get tested. And so that's why I don't have anything against Dr. Google. I just think that we need to be responsible about it. So,
Dr. Omojo, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today. We had your father on last week.
Really?
Yes, he was.
He didn't tell me.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
Busy family.
Very busy family indeed. Thank you very much for being with us for our final segment. You get to say goodbye along with us. It's been a great first installment for the weekend here on Breakfast Extra. Of course, tomorrow we're going to continue and bring you the conversations that all week you've always wanted us to elaborate on right here on Breakfast Extra. I want to say thank you very much, and hopefully you join us again tomorrow when it's myself and Inem and many more other guests. It's goodbye from us, and you can say goodbye too.
Bye.
Stay safe.